A police officer's ex-wife is gunned down in 1981 in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. Eventually, the killer is caught and justice is served. Or was it? Hello, true crimerers. This is the case of Laurie Bembenek. Viewer discretion is advised. "2:15 a.m., May 28th, 1981. An 11-year-old boy is suddenly awakened with a stranger sitting on top of him with his hand over his mouth and attempting to put a rope around the boy's neck. The boy screams and then wakes up his 8-year-old brother. And then the assailant flees the room, and then moments later, a gunshot rings out. The boys then wake up the courage to go see what happened. When they entered their mother's room, she was dead. Her killer was gone. And who was this masked maniac? Well, let's start at the beginning. Laurencia Ann Bembenek, who would actually just go by Laurie, she was born on August 15th, 1958 in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. She was the youngest of 3 siblings. Her father was a retired police officer. Her dad, Joseph, was a former member of the Milwaukee Police Department, but after serving several years, he decided to retire and basically quit because there was a massive amount of corruption within the department. And then he would just leave and he would just take on a new career to support his family. His daughter, Laurie, from a very early age was described as fiercely independent. As she got older, her beauty would stun everyone. But the reality is that Laurie was considered more of a tomboy. She liked to get her hands dirty. She liked to go out and just play outside and just do more, boy things, play sports, that kind of thing. But as she got through high school, she would take a liking to fashion design. And after she graduated high school, she would end up studying fashion and fashion merchandising. But if she was being honest, her heart was truly set on something else, a different career. She wanted to follow in her father's footsteps. She wanted to become a cop. The 70s, the 80s, the 90s, really kind of all the time. The police departments, not only in Milwaukee, but across the country, were considered, the boys' club. This was a male-dominant profession, still pretty much is. But a lot of people say that's kind of the reason why Laurie wanted to do this type of job, because that's just what interested her. Despite her father's belief that there was corruption in the department, which she had no choice but to believe, of course, she still admired his work as an officer, before he left. So, in March of 1980, around age 20 or 21, she would join the Milwaukee Police Academy. Training, of course, was a bit of a nightmare for her and the few other girls women that were in the training program. They were constantly sexually harassed. They were verbally abused and accosted. It just was not a very fun experience for females. As this was going on, she was also dating someone that she considered to be a serious boyfriend, but he wanted to marry her. But the problem is he wanted her to be a stay-at-home wife and eventually a mother. Do the traditional, cook and bake and clean and all that. And she's like, yeah, I'm not that person. No. So she would eventually leave him. By the early summer of 1980, Laurie would graduate from Police Academy and she became a cop. And then she would be assigned to Milwaukee's South Side. Pretty much immediately, she, along with other female rookies and minority officers who were also rookies, they pretty much began to experience harassment and ridicule from the get-go. And this was pretty much exclusively from the white male dominant group of the officers. Laurie and others like her were constantly being punished for really minor infractions and little things while the white male officers who did the same things, or usually a lot worse, weren't punished whatsoever. They weren't punished or spoken to or anything with regards to the sexual harassment. Nor were they addressed about the racism that was also very obviously going on in the department at that time. Unfortunately, Laurie's career as a police officer was going to be extremely short-lived. In the late summer of 1980, Laurie would go to a concert with a fellow female police officer in training, basically, and also now her very close friend. Her name was Judy Zess. While they were at this concert, and apparently Judy was smoking some pot. Judy. And she was caught, and she was let go from the police force because of this. And then Laurie, she allegedly falsified a report about this incident, and because of that, she was fired from the police force. And then that happened on August 25th, 1980. That's the day she was let go. She would make attempts to get work at other police departments, but yeah, that just wasn't going to happen. So she had to resort to getting babysitting jobs, and she got a job as a part-time security officer at like a mall or something. She had no choice but to just completely give up and surrender the career she so desperately wanted to have. It was sometime shortly after she was let go that she came across a few photos. Very, very scandalous photos. They were images of primarily male officers, but also a few female officers who were dancing at a public park at an event that was sponsored by like a nearby tavern. But in these photos, they weren't just dancing. They were doing so completely nude, both male and female officers, head to toe. And they were doing inappropriate things. You know, they were essentially, the things they were doing actually went against their protocol for being officers, even whether they were on the clock or not. It violated their own codes of conduct, their own rules. But not one of the officers got so much as a slap on the wrist, the male officers at least. I don't know if the female officers were punished. I imagine, given the environment, they may have been, but I can't confirm that. So Laurie took these photos and she brought them to the Equal Employment Opportunity Center, and they advised her to go to the Milwaukee Police Department's internal affairs because, you know, she definitely had a case. So she would provide those photos to internal affairs. However, it doesn't really sound like anyone was reprimanded or fired or, again, not even a slap on the wrist. That's great. One of the officers in the photo was a man by the name of Alfred Schultz, but he would go by Fred. He was a detective at the Milwaukee Police Department, and he had been so for about 13 years or so. Beforehand, Laurie and Fred did not know each other, and by happenstance, they would end up meeting. And she was unaware that he was one of the men in the photos at the time. I think she would later go on to find out, but at any rate, the two of them became quick friends, and then it turned into, they started to date, and then it's turned into, they got married. They were married in January of 1981. Fred was about 10 years older than Laurie. He had also had 2 kids from a previous marriage. He had just divorced Christine Schultz roughly 6 months before the two of them, Fred and Laurie, got married. So he wastes no time. Christine Schultz was born on November 15th, 1950, and she was born in Menominee, Michigan. Menominee? I don't know how to say it. But she would eventually move to Milwaukee, Wisconsin, where she would end up meeting Fred Schultz. The two of them would have 2 kids, Sean and Shannon, both boys, and they would, get married and eventually divorce. By 1980, Christine was over Fred's philandering and also the fact that he was just infatuated with other women. He was infatuated with going out and getting drunk and partying and clubbing, and it just really wasn't her scene at this point. And it just wasn't working out for the two of them. So they would divorce. The divorce meant that now Fred was responsible for paying child support for 2 kids, but also alimony. And the amount of money he would owe Christine every month would be roughly half of his income. So now with Fred and Laurie married, and with like all of the alimony and child support stuff now becoming more of a reality, because it took some time for this all to kick in, of course, now money was very tight for Laurie and Fred, and tensions were growing between the two of them. This takes us now to May 28th, 1981. Here at Christine Schultz's house, it was approximately 2:15 in the morning when 11-year-old Sean would wake up to someone with their hand over his mouth, almost sitting on top of him and trying to put a rope around his neck. Sean screamed, woke up his 8-year-old brother Shannon, who was asleep above him. The two of them freaked out. Then the person, this man, whoever it was, ran out of the bedroom and then appeared to go towards Christine's room. The two boys were like petrified of leaving the room or doing anything, so they just kind of stood there frozen. And then all of a sudden, a few moments later, they hear a loud gunshot. And then they see this masked person run past their room and run out the front door, and they were gone. So at that point, Sean and Shannon, they then hurried down to their mom's room. They found Christine lying on her stomach. Her wrists had been bound, and she had a blue bandana wrapped around her face and partially stuffed down her throat. They noticed that she had like blood on her back, and there was some blood on the sheets as well. They tried to put a Band-Aid over her wound to stop the bleeding, but obviously, that wasn't going to work. They called 911, and Christine was pronounced dead at the scene. Christine had been shot once through her spine. When the coroner examined her, they would determine that the gunshot was done at very close range because the gunshot wound was burnt essentially into her back, which would indicate to them that this was like almost pressed against her back or damn near close to her. Her wrists were tied with a piece of clothesline. The coroner would also find a strand of like red fiber on Christine's leg. And then on the blue bandana, they found a few strands of hair. So they collected all of it and, bagged it and tagged it. The 11-year-old, Sean, got a very decent look at this person. And so he would give a description to police. Sean described this person as a big, like, brawny man. He had like a red ponytail that was like poking out of the hat that the guy was wearing. He was also wearing a what appeared to be a green jumpsuit, or possibly like some kind of jogging or tracksuit. He also noticed that, because his dad is a cop, he noticed that the shoes the person was wearing looked like the same shoes that all cops would wear. The very first person that detectives obviously are going to go to in this situation, Christine wasn't dating anyone, she didn't have a new husband, so they went directly to Fred Schultz first because he is the ex-husband. And, they are going through a very bitter divorce, custody issues, there's a lot of alimony and child support involved, so it's Fred, right? But Fred said he was actually out working a case during the time in question, the time of this murder. He was working with his partner. But that would quickly turn out to be a big fat lie. It turns out that Fred and his partner were out getting drunk, getting shit-faced at a bar while they were on the clock. Yeah. Several witnesses would confirm that Fred and his partner were both at the bar literally at 2:15, 2:30. So there's no way that Fred himself was there at the house and murdered Christine. All that being said, they still wanted to collect Fred's weapons, and because he had his service weapon on him at the bar, they knew he had his own guns at home, so Fred willingly provided those guns. They would run a ballistics test on his gun, and guess what? This was the gun that shot and killed Christine Schultz. This is the murder weapon. Okay, well, if Fred was at a bar, confirmed by many people, who else would have had access to Fred's gun? The only other person who could have had access to it was his wife, Laurie. Police also discovered that Fred had a copy of Christine's front door key, and the only people who knew about that were his two sons and also Laurie. Then, in the building that Fred and Laurie lived in, the apartment building, a neighbor below them would call maintenance because there was a crazy clog somewhere in the pipes. When the plumber got there, they were able to discover what the clog was. It was a brownish, reddish wig that had been flushed down a toilet, it appeared. And it could have come from the apartment above. And who lived above them? Fred and Laurie. Fred had an alibi, could not have been him. So police, they arrest Laurie Bembenek for the murder of Christine Schultz. They arrest her while she is at work doing her security job, and they bring her in. Okay, but why would she do this? Because, Laurie and Christine didn't really know each other all that well. There wasn't any known beef between the two of them. But the very fact that Fred now had to take half of his income and give that to Christine for alimony and child support means that he wasn't spending money on her. Laurie had become very materialistic. She liked having fancy clothes and jewelry. She liked having the nice things. She had once been like a pinup model for, I think, Playboy. So she kind of was like, now that she was no longer a cop and she was now she's married to one, and she kind of wanted to go back to that kind of that lifestyle of being just lavished and looked at and pampered and all of that. So that's the motive they came up with, was financial. Police would search Laurie's locker at work, and in there they found a hairbrush. They took samples from that hairbrush, and according to their hair analyst, the hairs found on Laurie's brush in her locker were a consistent match with the hairs that were found on the bandana wrapped around Christine's head. Not a conclusive match, they just said they were a consistent match. My question is this: why are they taking hair from the brush and not directly from Laurie's head? I don't understand that part. Because wouldn't you have to compare the hair from the brush then to the hair on Laurie's head to know that it for sure was hers? I mean, it was in her locker, but that doesn't necessarily mean that every strand of hair is necessarily hers. She could have shared it with someone, you never know. Laurie was very blonde at the time. But most of the hairs on the brush were blonde. So the hairs found on Christine, we'll get back to that a little bit later. What does Sean say? The 11-year-old witness, the person who saw the killer just head on. Well, he said, no, it's the person I saw was not Laurie. He was very adamant. This was a big guy. He pressed me down. He was going to put a rope around my neck. I saw him. I felt him. I felt his pride. This is a guy, a big, brawny guy. It's not Laurie. At the same time, police who were interviewing, friends, would say that Laurie did own a green jogging suit. As a matter of fact, it was her old friend and former police officer herself, Judy Zess, who would tell police that she did own a green tracksuit, which, by the way, has never actually been found. The same witness would also say, yeah, she also owned a blue bandana. Couldn't say for sure if it was the one found around Christine, but she had one, I guess. But these are witness statements. These are not physically confirmed, physical proof evidence things. This is just what people have said. There was a boutique owner who did come forward to say that Laurie Bembenek did go to her boutique and purchased a red wig. The red wig that was found clogged in the pipes below Laurie's apartment, the red fibers taken from it were a consistent match with the fiber, that red fiber that was found on Christine's leg. Other witnesses had said that Laurie had threatened Christine before, that she had also said that she wanted Christine dead. The guy came forward to say that he was offered money by Laurie to kill Christine. But was there physical proof that she did that? No. They didn't do like a sting operation to, find out if she had, in fact, tried to pay someone money. They didn't get any kind of audio recorded confession. Nothing. There was no proof to actually corroborate those witness statements. On March 9th, 1982, Laurie Bembenek was found guilty of the murder of Christine Schultz. She would be sentenced to life in prison without parole. In June of 1984, Laurie from prison would divorce her husband, Fred Schultz. She found out that he had been sleeping around with some 19-year-old girl. And also, he basically was saying that, yeah, I think she did it. I think she killed my ex-wife. He stood by her side during the entire trial. He was there to support her, and he never said anything at trial, during the trial going on, that he thinks that Laurie was guilty. But afterwards, he definitely changed his mind. He said that, quote, "She is guilty as sin, and I believe she did it, and she did it for both her and I." Laurie would continue to profess her innocence. She would go on to say things like, why on earth, if I was going to do this, why on earth would I use my husband's, who is a cop, why would I use his gun to kill her? Why would I do that? And then put the gun back, knowing full well, as my experience as an officer, and he is an officer, we're involved in the cop world, know full well about ballistic testing. Why would I use his gun? She believes that she was set up by the Milwaukee Police Department. And she believes that because of all of her attempts to call out their harassment, their discrimination against not only females, but minorities. And most importantly, she wanted to get these people in trouble for all of those photos of them nude out in public, which went against their actual, codes of conduct. And that could have ended some of their careers in some cases. That could have cost them, some of those officers, their job, and therefore their money, their livelihood, their respect, their power. All of it could be gone. She would appeal after appeal after appeal. She was always denied. So on June 15th, 1990, Laurie, she snuck out of a window from the prison's laundry room, and she scaled a super tall barbed wire fence, hopped over that bad boy, and she got into a waiting car that was being driven by her now fiance, whose name is Dominic Guglietti. The press had nicknamed her Bambi, and I don't necessarily know why. I know she's always said she's hated that nickname, but they nicknamed her Bambi. So the public, after she escaped from prison, when she was on the run, a lot of people in the public were on her side. They believed she was innocent. There was a huge portion, at least, of people that truly believed that she was not guilty of this. And so they came up, they coined the phrase, "Run, Bambi, run." So it became a thing. They made bumper stickers out of it. They had little, posters and all this crap made for it. And all these people were fully supporting her. And then America's Most Wanted put Laurie's and Dominic's face all over their program, saying they were on the lam. And eventually, because of that, they were found. So they were out in the world for about 3 months before they were caught, and that Laurie was reapprehended and put back in jail. They were found in Thunder Bay in Ontario, Canada. So what they did to Laurie then was they threw her in solitary confinement, and they did that for an entire year. Afterwards, she still professed her innocence. She said, "I did not kill Christine. I would never even so much as hurt another woman. I did not do this. The witness said it was a man who killed her. I'm not a big brawny man. I'm a petite female." So she thinks, and she says it again, the MPD And more than likely, at this point, her actual ex-husband now, Fred Schultz, framed her for the murder of Christine Schultz. Laurie even produced the name of a possible suspect. This was a man named Freddie Horenberger. He just so happened to be the ex-boyfriend of Laurie's old friend, Judy Zess, the one who said that, oh yeah, Judy owned the green jumpsuit, the so-called friend of Laurie. So Horenberger was her ex-boyfriend, and well, he actually had beat Judy Zess up and stole a lot of her money. And then 2 weeks after that, Christine ends up dead. Horenberger actually has direct ties to the MPD, and he was actually associated with and friends with Fred Schultz. This is a guy, by the way, who is a career criminal. He has a rap sheet of robbery, assaults, and he's chummy with a detective, a cop. Judy Zess would testify against Laurie at the trial. So was Judy threatened to testify against her? Was she forced into it? Was she under control of the men of the MPD by them using Mr. Horenberger? Well, Horenberger would end up going to prison for the attack he did on Judy. He would spend about 10-ish years or so in prison. While in jail for that, he bragged to a couple of inmates about killing Christine Schultz. He also fit the description to a T of the man that Sean saw in the house that night of the killer. Fit it perfectly. But in 1991, he would end his own life, and therefore whatever truth he has, whatever story he could say, gone with him. Okay, so during the trial, a hair analyst, like I said, they analyzed the hairs and they said, yes, they were a consistent match with Laurie's hair. Well, at the time, Laurie was very much blonde. And so the coroner, who actually took the hairs off of the bandana originally, she had said, well, and this is after the trial and everything, I'm guessing she didn't testify because I don't know why she would have said this, but she said that I did not pull off any blonde hairs off of that bandana. She said, I don't know how the hairs I pulled off that bandana would have matched Laurie because, as a matter of fact, the hairs I pulled off the bandana were a damn near identical match to the victim. And she even flat out said in an interview, I think that evidence was switched out. Because at one point, she said that the envelope that had the hairs in them was taken out of custody and then put back into custody. So she thinks that the hair was planted, that it was literally swapped out. But unfortunately, there's no proof to back it up. We don't have the originals if that's what happened. They're gone. Okay, so then what about the red wig? What that kind of somehow proves, right, that Laurie was guilty. Well, here's an odd twist. The neighbor that called the plumbers to check on the clogged pipes, well, that neighbor had said that they recognized someone. They recognized Judy Zess because one day Judy came to this person's apartment and asked to use the bathroom. They recognized Judy because she had been to the apartment above before. They were friends with the people above. And then the neighbor said after Judy was done using the bathroom, that's when there was a clog in the toilet. And then that just so happens to be when they pull out a reddish brownish wig. And it was also confirmed, again, only through witness statements, that Judy did own a red wig. So again, was she bullied or threatened into helping assist the police with framing Laurie? Or is it all just a bunch of hogwash? A former Milwaukee Police Department detective would send an anonymous letter to a popular news magazine. This letter said that immediately after Christine's death, the MPD had like an all-hands-on-deck meeting. And at that meeting, they were essentially trying to figure out who the fall guy was going to be for Christine's murder. And then, after a lot of persistence from Laurie, there's a couple new things that were tested. One, on a piece of evidence, they were able to find DNA. That DNA was male DNA, and it was found in an area on the body, on an article of clothing near the body, to suggest that possibly Christine was sexually assaulted, which would indicate a sexual motive. But then that would rule Laurie out. Then they managed to get them to retest the revolver that they had done ballistic testing on before the trial and said, yep, this is the gun that shot and killed Christine. Nope. They tested that same exact gun in 1992, I think is the year it was done. And guess what? Wasn't the gun. Wasn't the gun at all. Not the murder weapon. Well, then, signed, sealed, delivered. That's it. You got to acquit her, right? She was found guilty on false evidence. This is a slam dunk. No. They don't know whose gun shot her. Laurie didn't own her own gun. Doesn't mean she could not have gotten one. But again, you have to go back to the actual witness of this crime. The young boy who said, again, for the third time in this video, it was a large, bulky, brawny man who did this. It was not Laurie. She was not in there doing this. With all of this information, this new couple pieces of evidence coming forward, they would allow Laurie to plead no contest now to second-degree murder. And they basically lessened her sentence to 20 years total. So no longer life without parole. It was the only thing she could do at this point to be able to say she can be free one day. And very quickly afterwards, she was freed. Sometime in the 90s, she was let go and was out, in the world, released from the confines of her prison cell. But she was still considered guilty in the eyes of the law, despite everything, despite all of the lack of, now at this point, any actual physical evidence. Most of their evidence was very loosely circumstantial. They were relying a lot on witness testimonies. Who knows how reliable those could be. And ever since Laurie was released, she fought and fought and fought to not just to have her name cleared, to be officially exonerated, to be pardoned, to be no longer considered guilty of this murder, on paper, just in her name. But sadly, in 2010, Laurie died from liver and kidney failure, and she was just 52 years old. Her lawyer, still to this day, is fighting to get her pardoned posthumously. And so far, the lawyer hasn't won, but from what I understand to this day, they are still fighting for it. I mean, my gut tells me that she didn't do this, or at the very least, there isn't nowhere near enough to convince anyone that she did. Could she have hired someone? Yes, she would have had to, because, the witness, albeit they're young, but this person was on top of this boy. They know that it was a man. This was a large man who did this. So they know for a fact that it wasn't Laurie in that house that night who did this. They only saw one person running from the home, and that was the same person that attacked them. The male DNA found on Christine. To my knowledge, it hasn't matched anyone, but obviously that proves that it's not Laurie. The hair being swapped out, for God's sakes. And again, why did they only use the hairs they found on Laurie's brush inside of her work locker and not the hairs directly from her head? And I think the ultimate motive is Laurie was trying to possibly end careers by going after these members of the police department who were discriminating and sexually harassing and all of these horrible things. And now these, nude photos, trying to get them in trouble for those. which is odd because now they're all public. The photos, you can see them. The trial, they had to rely heavily on circumstantial evidence and witness testimony from people who may not have been reliable, like, for example, Judy Zess, who could have been under pressure by the police department. For me, it just doesn't add up. I don't know. If I was on a jury in this case, I would have to say, like, the prosecution did not prove their case at all. I would have no choice but to say not guilty. Doesn't mean innocent, Doesn't mean innocent, it just means not guilty. Again, it's very possible she could have done this. I mean, there is that possible motive of the financials, right? She's married to a man who's now having to give half of his money away to his ex-wife, and now he can't spend that money on her. So yeah, there is motive there. It just, is it a strong motive compared to others? Who knows? I don't know. But what do you think? I'll do another poll like a day after I post this video to see what you guys think. But that is it for this case. I hope you found it interesting. As usual, if you want to see shorter form cases from me, like usually around 3 minutes or so a piece, over on my TikTok page, I have a whole bunch of videos talking about a whole bunch of true crimes. So yeah, hop on over there, give me a follow. I'm not posting like true crime cases over there anymore. This is my primary platform for that. But I'm keeping the account around so that way you guys can see the videos I have over there. So yeah, go give a follow if you want. Secondly, if you have a case you would like me to cover, please email me at mikey@truecrimerer.com. Please check my case list in my link tree below first. Make sure the name you want me to cover is not on there. If it isn't, then email me. If it is, please do not email me. It's already on there. I pick my cases at random. I'll get to it eventually, but it maybe just take some time. If you want to support me in any way, I do sell merch. I sell t-shirts and hoodies and mugs and a wine glass, and for the next couple of weeks, Christmas ornaments. So that's also in the link tree below. Adam, he makes my merch himself. He does ship internationally, so wherever you are in the world, he will ship it to you. To those who live outside of the world, somewhere in the universe, unfortunately, we cannot ship to you. Lastly, if you have Discord and you want to join my Discord server, it's a very quiet, chill, hangout type server. It's not a crazy busy one like gamer ones or whatever. You are more than welcome to join. The link is also in the link tree below. Please be over the age of 18. If you are not, and we discover it, you will be kicked out. So just be mindful of that and be respectful of that, pretty please, with cherries on top. And please don't bombard the Discord server with a whole bunch of stuff. We're not about that. No spamming, please, or you'll be kicked out. All right. Well, that is it for this case, True Crime Aroonies. Until the next one, I like fireflies in my beverages, preferably crunchy. With a little, sprinkled with a little bit of salt and pepper, but I like the big fireflies with like the what?